Hello, my name is Pikiss-Chris,
And I'm Bastardswordsman.
and welcome to another episode of Scenes from a Podcast. So, before we get into today's movie, we're going to be talking about what we've been up to recently. What about you, Bastard Swordsman? What have you been up to?
Nothing much. Just been reading more Zarigoto, which is pretty alright, I guess. It really peaked with that second volume, I hear.
Yeah? Is it like.
Yeah.
It's not as good as the first volume? Is
No,
the
not
second.
the first volume, the second volume. Well, I can't really say that because I haven't finished it yet, but um the third volume was kind of meh. Volumes 4 and 5 are one arc, which was actually pretty good, and I would say that's the second best, but not as good as the second volume. And I'm on volume 6 right now, which is the longest one so far. And that one has actually been entertaining so far, like more than the past few. So,
So it's a
but
bit of
yeah,
a roller coaster in terms of quality.
quality. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't think any of them are bad, but at least so far. But uh Nisio Isin, the writer, has definitely made like better stuff, but I don't know, it's weird because like not all of his novels are amazing, but every now and then he'll like come out with an arc that is like just oh my god, this is near perfect. And then he just has some other ones which are like, yeah, this is okay.
I get where you're coming from. Personally, I'd much rather have a writer whose worst is just it's just okay than like
I,
a
I mean, he does have another series called the Pretty Boy Detective Club, which is actually just like gay bait, and it's really boring and not good and not well written.
So what do you mean like gay bait? It promises man on man loving, but it don't deliver.
No, it's like it's just a bunch. Well, the main character is a girl, and the rest of the cast is male, and they just act really effeminate, basically.
Okay, so
And
it's that kind of teenage girl fantasy.
yeah, I mean, I don't think any of them are explicitly gay, but they just act really fruity. And they're like in the anime, there's like shots of their legs and butt shots. Yeah.
I I think I know what you're talking about. Uh the anime at least, or it could be like another anime. I've never seen it, but
It was really recent. Well, not really
Okay.
recent. It was a couple years ago, and it wasn't very popular at all.
What was it? At least mid 2000s, or like was it
No,
more?
it was like I just said a couple years ago.
Okay, then.
It's like 2021, I think.
You have to understand. I'm terrified by the never-ending march of time, and I perpetually want it to be 2009.
I mean, that is one of the last good years for media, but
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I feel you too on that. Just especially when you get old, I don't know, like time starts becoming scary.
Yeah.
You know, when you're a kid, you want to be an adult, and then when you're an adult, you don't want to be an adult anymore.
Yeah. Oh my god. Fucking hate taxes. Shit. I just got
Yeah.
done like filing my tax returns and like finding out that like once again money that the government owes me from last year they did not pay back to me, which doesn't surprise me, but it's like
On today's episode of Scenes from a Scenes from a Podcast, I forgot the name. We talk about taxes.
On today's episode, we become radical libertarians.
I filed my taxes pretty recently, and yeah, I mean, it's nice that I actually get money and I don't actually, pay money through filing taxes, because then I'd be really pissed off. I have to go through all that crap, and then at the end, I'm losing money. I have to pay money to, like, the biggest terrorist organization in America, the IRS.
Even bigger than the CIA, which is saying something.
I mean, even the CIA has to pay taxes,
Uh,
I assume. Maybe.
I
Don't quote me on that.
let's put a pin in that.
Yeah. Aside from that, not much. What about you?
I've been I've been trying to do like this sort of comparison video between the two most popular versions of the two most popular Spider-Man cartoons, and that would be the animated series from the 90s, and that would, as well as the Spectacular Spider-Man. I've been watching both series just to like sort of make a comparison video, because it's like, so a lot of people dismiss the early 90s show as having no merit because Spectacular just did so many things right. And I mean, I guess that's kind of true, but I also kind of wanted to go back and see if there was anything, worth defending in that old show.
Is there?
Uh, some a little bit. I've only gotten like a little through the first season of both shows. Keep in mind, like the 90s show was like 5 seasons, and Spectacular was only like 2 seasons. So it's like, it's going to be like a really hard comparison, because the first show had a lot more time to work with. But I guess you could say like the second show did a lot more with a lot less. So one thing that does kind of annoy me is how much inner monologue Peter has in the original show. It's just like, it's not even used for characterization. It's just like exposition most of the time, and it's
like an anime.
yeah. No, really it is though. It's like, just dude, shut the fuck up. I can see what's happening on screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
I also hear that you've been
that I've been what?
really getting into the catalog of Nux Taku lately too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So we were talking about this before we started recording, uh about how I recently discovered this fucking edgelord terminally online guy called Nux, because he was like simping over some VTuber who was getting bullied for making a cover song, and people started making fun of him for his Billie Eilish "I'm the Bad Guy" parody, and
I
it's a
think that was
song.
like, I think people made fun of him over that for like a while before that, but
Yeah, but like that was like the first thing I saw. It was just, so now I'm on this rabbit hole of like of Nux, and it's a trip, man.
yeah.
It's really a trip.
Yeah, I don't really want to insult anybody, especially on podcast form. It's kind of unprofessional, but all I'll say is that I personally do not care for his content.
Yeah, I guess I'm sort of a hypocrite, because like I didn't know the VTuber in question, but I thought that like a lot of the quote tweets for the song were a little uncalled for. But
Mm.
I don't know.
VTubers in general are just kind of weird to me, just as a concept. Like I don't know, like they have their place, and I know a lot of people who are really into them, but I just don't get it personally.
Yeah. Well, I
I
mean, I've
mean,
I've done things that are a lot cringier too, but I don't know.
well, same here, but like start a podcast.
We literally decided to start a podcast rather than going to therapy.
Uh,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I also got some books while I was with you, obviously, but I didn't say it on the podcast. Yeah, I got some interesting books. I got Kokoro by Natsume Soseki, who's considered to be one of the like most well received and essential Japanese writers. He wrote in the early 20th century, like the very early 20th century. And I've been wanting to get into Japanese literature, so I thought I'd get one of his books. I haven't read it yet, but yeah, and I also got another book from a Japanese writer, Haruki Murakami, who is a more acclaimed contemporary writer. I think he's been writing since like the 70s or 80s. Not entirely sure on that, but I got Kafka on the Shore, which apparently is like a big fan favorite book. Um, it's like a book for Murakami fans, but it's not like one of his necessarily most critically acclaimed ones. But I decided might as well start there with a fan favorite, and one of my friends vouched for it, so I'm excited to read that too.
All right. Well, I'm just reading the Wikipedia article for Kafka on the Shore here. See if I can add anything to the conversation. Apparently, there's some.
Mm.
No, I can't add anything to the conversation. I might as well stop
Sometimes
pretending.
it's just like that.
Yeah. All right.
But there is one thing that we can both talk about, right?
Yes, you want to introduce today's movie?
Yeah. Okay. So last time I recommended a movie from 1968. Oldest one we've covered so far, I believe. It's directed by Ingmar Bergman, who's one of my personal favorite directors, and it's called Shame. And basically, it follows this couple played by Max von Sydow and Liv Ullmann, who are like very frequent collaborators with Bergman. Um, and Max von Sydow is probably the most legendary Swedish actor, like, period. And Liv Ullmann is probably one of the greatest actresses, in my opinion. And so the couple have a very tumultuous marriage, but also in the background, there's a war going on. So the film basically follows both this war and their declining relationship. And it's a very dark film. A lot of Bergman's films are pretty dark and existential, philosophical. Yeah, and I would say this is among his better movies. I really liked it. What about you?
Uh, among Ingmar's films, I've only seen this one and The Seventh Seal.
You saw
So
Persona as well, right?
I might have. Let me. Yeah, I did see Persona. I don't know why I forgot that.
Yeah.
Uh, I will say Well, I probably like the Seventh Seal more just because I like the idea of personifying death. This one's probably the better film overall. Uh, I do spoilers, but
Yeah, spoilers for shame.
yeah. So I can't remember the characters' names, but it did strike me that we're sort of introduced to them being somewhat dysfunctional from the start. Like they're sort of kind of bickering and putting each other down as they're getting ready to go out, and it's it's like it's sort of hard to tell if it's like if they were otherwise functional but just kind of jaded and adult, or if they were dysfunctional in the war, like sort of made that more apparent, like they weren't a healthy couple to begin with.
I think it's a bit of both, but the war definitely exacerbated the issues. But yeah, like, well, very early on, it's clear that, there is, love between them. And, you can see glimpses of, why they would be together. Like, they still like flirt with each other and, smile and, touch each other. But yeah, I'm not good with character names either in movies. I usually just will remember them by the guy or the woman who does this, or I remember them by their actor, and that's what I did here. Yeah, I don't remember their names either. But Max von Sydow, I think the first thing he says in the film is that he has this dream where they're like happy and they were able to put all the problems they have behind them, which already like lets you know, oh yeah, they're going through some issues. Their marriage isn't like, you know, totally functional.
Yeah. I would like to say that I'm really glad the dysfunction of the relationship comes from circumstances other than adultery,
Yeah.
because because I'm just so fucking sick of adultery plot lines in media in general. It just feels like the laziest way to introduce conflict, especially in like romantic plots. Like here it's, to me at least, it seemed more like they were frustrated with each other because of a shift in economic status. They used to be like part of a
Well,
concert
also just, yeah.
or an orchestra, and I also like that because it gives them a background. They're not just like people who came out of the aether to be part of the story. They had a past, and it informs who they are now.
Well, as someone who's seen a lot of Bergman's movies, I will say that a lot of them do have adultery.
Of course, of course,
Yeah.
to be expected. The artist cannot be cannot be barred from that which is most alluring to him.
Yeah, in fact, Bergman himself did have an affair because he was married. Um, I don't know if he was married by the time this came out, but he was having an affair with Liv Ullmann for a little while he was married. But yeah,
That is,
so probably speaking from experience in a lot of his films.
remember, kids, don't cheat on your wife. Cheating on your wife is bad.
Yeah, we don't condone adultery,
We
but
we do not.
yeah. Anyway, um, so I actually watched this film twice, um, because I feel like, well, with Bergman in general, his films are so layered and they're very script heavy. Like he's a very good director, but um, a big point of his films is like dialogue and characterization, and like sometimes you need to watch them multiple times. Well, usually you need to watch his movies multiple times to really like sort of fully understand the characters and pick up on little pieces of characterization. So that's what I did with this one. And one thing I noticed was there's this motif of dreams, which is mentioned like a few times. Max von Sydow mentions the dream where he's where they've made up. Then Liv Ullmann uh, says that the situation is like a dream, but a dream that someone else is having, um, which I thought was a very interesting line. And then at the end of the film, she talks about a dream that she has.
The whole ending of the movie is very dreamlike too. Like
Yeah,
they're sort of drifting out in the middle of a sea, sort of hallucinating, I guess, because of dehydration and exhaustion and all that. And it sort of leaves on an ambiguous note whether or not they like cross to where they're escaping to. And I kind of like that. I like how
yeah,
it's less about the happily ever after and more about the feeling of exhaustion and hopelessness and sort of processing your emotions when you're like too tired to like understand them, I guess.
yeah. Well, I don't think these characters would end up getting a happily ever after.
No, obviously not, but
No. Um, but yeah, this I was going to say this was Bergman's only war film. I think it is. I could be wrong. Well, the only one where the war is like in the forefront. But it's interesting because it's like a fictional war. It's not actually based on, anything in real life like World War II or anything. It's almost sort of like a alternate universe dystopia.
I I
And
I do think it is loosely based off of the Soviet Union and sort of what its invasions of the Baltic area. Uh, I think either between the world wars or sometime during the beginning of World War II. I can't remember.
mm, I find it interesting though how like you don't actually know anything about either side. There's just the one side that's like, they're like the government, and then there's like the liberation sort of like independence movement, and you don't really know anything about their ideals or like what they stand for or what they're trying to do, why they're at war, and like the not even the characters know.
It's a Yeah, the first time we see the rebel characters up close, they're like invading their farm and basically threatening them implicitly with death if they don't at least pretend to thank them for liberating them and letting them use them for propaganda purposes, which I think is very poignant, especially these days. That there's a lot of groups that think that because they're opposed to the primary ideology that automatically makes their methods justifiable.
Yeah. There is definitely some sort of commentary on like war and um, independence movements and government rule. Uh, the Vietnam War was also going on at the same time that this film came out, and um, it was like definitely like a topic of interest sort of around the world, and a lot of European filmmakers made their own commentary on it as well. Uh, but you know, a lot of war films you hear, oh, it's about the horrors of war, and there are definitely some really good ones, but um, that's sort of like what they all sort of turn into, like war is hell, etc. Um, but like this is less about like the horrors of war and more just about like the decline of like human morals, and it's more just about like the cruelness of man, and in this case like war is just something that brings that cruelty out.
Yeah, it's like, again, like we were saying, like the characters are kind of dysfunctional even before they, like, they're sort of pettily insulting and belittling each other and only really apologizing for it in order to save face. And then by the end of it, like
Yeah.
the husband is like shooting like a runaway soldier who's like a teenager to like steal his supplies, and slapping his wife when she like objects to it.
Yeah, there is sort of like a role reversal because the husband Max von Sydow is really like timid and cowardly and weak-willed, and she's more assertive um, in scenes. Like there's the scene where like the bombing is happening and she's like dragging him out, like, come on, we gotta go, and like he's like a bumbling buffoon. Like she tells him to like kill the chicken so they have food, and
He
he's
can't
like, oh, I don't want to wring their necks, and so he's like, I'm just gonna shoot them, and which is a really idiotic idea. You can't really eat a chicken with like a bullet in it, and yeah, he can't even do that. Like he misses, so they just leave the chickens there. He's like a like complete like an utter like failure. Um, but then like later towards the end of the film, he does become more assertive, but in a completely terrible way. Like yeah, and the wife Liv Ullmann kind of just sort of gradually breaks down due to all the messed up shit going on throughout the film.
You do see a lot of that in real life, people who think that kindness equals timidness, and sort of when that sort of gets them stepped on, they sort of think the solution to that is to is that assertiveness equals cruelty, and so they sort of do a 180, and to them it's an improvement, but it's really just them going from one extreme to the other.
Yeah.
uh I will say I did think it was sort of interesting how the film handled the cuckolding subplot, which which like like you were saying earlier, that the husband's kind of a coward, and it almost seems like he's either willfully ignorant of the fact that the commander who's protecting them is sort of abusing his position to force his wife into a relationship with him, or he's like too cowardly to like stand up and defend both of them from him. And it's
Well, I mean, well, then he just like lets him die, well, and literally kills him.
Yeah, but even then, he killed him because other soldiers were like surrounding him and saying, "Kill this man for us." Would
Mhm.
at least that's what happened, right? I remember it that way.
That's sort of like the big turning point in the movie, um, in the relationship between the couple as well. Um, I I really liked how okay, so the yeah, that guy, his name was Jacoby, and he's played by Gunnar Bjornstrand. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He's another like actor who works a lot with, or worked a lot with Bergman. Um, yeah, he gives Liv Ullmann some just his life savings just because he apparently loves her so much. Like yeah, modern day like e-simping. Wait, no, that doesn't make any sense.
I
The old equivalent to e-simping in the modern day.
and then he changes his mind when they threaten him to kill him if he doesn't get the money back, or they say that he can buy his way to freedom if they give him the money back. I don't remember. Maybe it was a little bit of both.
Well, no, he gave her his money, but then later he finds out that oh well that he has to like pay the people like the independence liberation whatever group money so that they don't kill him. So then he asks for it back. But like the big turning point is that
He
Liv
decides
Ullmann
that
gives yeah, Liv Ullmann gives the money to Max von Sydow, and then he lies. He's like, "Oh, I don't know where that is."
yeah.
And the part that I really liked that I was gonna get to, God, I'm really awful at off the cuff, non-scripted talking, but uh, the scene that stuck out to me was when they took the ring from her finger, like right after Max von Sydow says he doesn't know where the money is, because like they're basically like destroying all their stuff and destroying their house, but I found that symbolic of also the sort of like destruction of their marriage at that point, because really, if you were in those same characters' place and like like your spouse lied about something like that, and especially when it had such like awful consequences, yeah, you would probably not want to be married to them anymore.
Again, it's very cowardly on his part because he's sort of he's he's allowing it to happen to save his own skin, but he's blaming his wife for being like forced into that relationship, and then he like takes it out on both the guy and then on her, when it's like it's his fault too, because he didn't like fucking stand up and like protect her, you know?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I think the war in general is just sort of symbolic for any turbulent period in like a couple's lives. And one thing that one line that sticks out, I think, is when they're talking about having kids, and Max von Sydow says that they'll have kids when peace comes, and I think Liv Ullmann says that they'll never have kids then because peace will never come.
I think that, yeah, and no, you basically summarized it. Uh, we
Yeah, that's sort of a big thing in a lot of like long-term relationships, though, like thinking that like having kids will solve your problems, or like waiting to solve your problems until or like, or no, sorry, waiting to have kids until you solve your problems, like, are both sort of, well, the latter is definitely like the more intelligent thing to do. But in this instance, they're both sort of just like ways to show that the relationship is sort of like doomed in this circumstance because, like, basically, like, they're not going to have kids because, like, their relationship isn't going to hold out.
Yeah, I I can't really add on to that. I sort of want to pivot to like a another subject. I think it's kind of interesting how most of the film is spent on the farm because we're seeing the war from their perspective, but there are like little glimpses where we like go to other areas. Like early on in the film, we go to that little village where they sort of say goodbye to one of their, I guess, friends. I wouldn't say neighbor because they're too far apart. And it's the one of the few times we get to see the war from the perspective of someone other than them, where this guy is just kind of resigned to the fact that he's gonna die for a cause he doesn't really believe in, and
Yeah.
his friends are like giving him a little bit of hope that, well, maybe you can use your injury or disability as an excuse to like get out of it. And I think the implication is that he didn't. I don't know if he shows up in the movie again after that. He might have during like the processing scene. I can't remember.
I don't remember either, honestly. I'd have to watch it again. I do kind of find it interesting how Max, the husband and the wife, have very different approaches to the war. Like, Max von Sydow says, "Oh yeah, you can use your injury to like get out of it," but his friend says, "Oh, like, no, that's like cowardly." But also, like, Liv Ullman tries to help that the one paratrooper who like gets shot down, and Max von Sydow says like, "No, they might be the enemy," but then she just runs off, and it sort of like shows the like just the futility of trying, like, of the war, and how like just its existence destroys people, like, no matter like what their approach is, because it's like a damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like, if you don't do anything, like, you know, you're kind of a coward, but then like if you do try to act, then like you could just get burned, or like, yeah, you could easily find yourself in more trouble or even killed.
Oh my god. I saw this film like over a week ago. I wish I had more to say on it. Uh I
Yeah,
did idiotically think that it was set in Italy before you told
yeah.
me that it was in Sweden, so because I
That
can't.
was really funny. Yeah, Chris thought this was Italian, um, because I think you thought that Bergman was an Italian name. Um, like, that's Italian, right? And then there's the line where Liv Ullman says that she's thinking of like learning Italian, which was perfect.
I'm thinking of learning my own language.
I was that's that was like that. This movie was like personalized just for that viewing experience.
Oh my god.
It's probably the funniest personal anecdote I can think of the movie. So definitely, this movie will stick with me for that reason, among others, because I do think it's just a really great movie.
Yeah. It,
But yeah, go ahead.
uh, I do think that sort of. Ugh, oh my god. I had a thought in my head and it dematerialized.
Mhm.
All right, you go you go ahead.
Oh yeah. So some like background information. This film and a lot of Bergman's movies take place on this very small island called Faro, which has a population of like less than 1,000 people. And Bergman like just really loved that sort of like more isolated, sort of rural like lifestyle. And yeah, and basically it's off the coast of a much bigger island called Gotland, and I believe that's where they were going to when they crossed that ferry. But yeah, it's a very interesting um, island because of just Bergman living there and shooting a lot of his films there. And it was actually also under military protection until the end of the Cold War.
That is that probably informed a lot of the themes in this movie.
Mhm. Um, hmm. Yeah, I think this film is really great, and I love Bergman. He's, like I said, he's one of my favorite directors, but also you kind of have to watch a lot of his films a few times to really get a complete, like, confident grasp on them. Um, and they're very rewarding films to rewatch, I feel, but also just all the sort of themes and concepts are just sort of swimming around in my head, and I'm I'm definitely not able to do justice to this film, but I think it's really good though, and yeah. Do you have anything else to add?
I will say with a lot of these sort of anti-war movies, the themes sort of take priority over the character, which where you were saying earlier about how it always sort of devolves into a generic war is hell thing, which is true, but it's like you're not really saying anything new about it. I think this being sort of more of a character study about a couple being caught in the midst of a war and how it sort of brings out the worst in them rather than them just being victims of the war, but how they're sort of contributing to the awfulness of the world too. I feel like that sort of adds another dimension to it that wouldn't have been there had it just been like every other anti-war piece.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's my big brain thesis for this movie. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd probably give
Well.
it a just in terms of scoring, probably give it a like an 8 out of 10. So
Yeah. Bergman's movies like have to do with love and the absence of it a lot, and I feel that this is one of the best examples of that theme in his filmography. Um, but yeah, I really like this movie. It's not quite my favorite Bergman movie. He definitely has a few that I prefer. He has a lot of really great movies, though. Like, he made a lot of movies, and quite a few of them were pretty good. Um, I think The Seventh Seal is like, not only do I prefer it, I think it is a better movie, and I would consider it like among his like top three. Uh, Scenes from a Marriage, Persona, uh, Autumn Sonata. Those are other really good ones that I think are a bit better than this, but I would it's definitely top 10, and I really like it. And yeah, I'm hovering between like an 8 or a 9. I'll uh I'll probably go with a 9 out of 10 because I liked it a bit more on my rewatch. So yeah, I would definitely recommend.
Yeah. We saw it on the Criterion Collection DVD Blu-ray release, I mean. Sorry, I get them mixed up in my head.
And
Uh
it's on Criterion Channel too.
yes. Uh we would recommend that you go watch it just for the if you can afford it anyway. I'm not sure. Well, let me look up other places where you can find it.
I think it's the only place where you can just stream it. It's like $9.99 a month. This is not a paid uh a paid sponsorship of the Criterion channel, by the way, but yeah, there are. But I would recommend probably doing that because there are a lot of good movies on there. And if you can't, you can rent or buy off of YouTube.
Yes. Apparently, there's also this other streaming service. I'm not sure whether it's any good or not, called Voodoo, which it seems to be
Yeah,
on. So,
I think that's like a free thing. I'm not sure.
you
But,
can rent it for $2.99 or buy it for $14.99. So, yeah. So,
yeah,
anyways, whether it's the Blu-ray, the Criterion streaming service, YouTube, whatever the hell Voodoo is, we would recommend that you go watch this movie. Uh, and I guess just to bookend it, I would say this is probably of the three Bergman films I've seen, probably my second favorite actually. Persona is probably my least favorite personally, but
that's my favorite.
yeah, to each their own.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um, I,
so
I don't think this would actually be like this wouldn't be my first recommendation for someone getting into Bergman. There like are a few other ones that that I'd recommend first, like The Seventh Seal or Wild Strawberries is another good one. But yeah,
it's a very, very good film. However, you can please give it a watch and hopefully check out other Ingmar Bergman films because he's a genuinely talented director.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So my pick for next week, I think this will be our first animated film. Uh
Hmm.
yes. So I've been
I
wanting to
think
see
so.
I've been wanting to see this film for a while now. I know you haven't seen it yet. It's DreamWorks's Prince of Egypt. So if you can, please go watch that before you come join us for our next episode. And yeah, hopefully spread the good word, quite literally in this case. But
Yeah. All right, I'm looking forward to that. I've wanted to see that film for a while, but haven't gotten around to it. So yeah,
yeah, all right. We'll see you next time. Take care.
see you next time.